Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, June the 13th, 2024. So I notice that Hunter Biden, son of Joe, has been found guilty of lying on his form that he submitted when buying a gun. And I think that all happened in 2018. We don't know when the sentencing is, but I thought it would be a good idea to look at what's going on in Hunter Biden's chart right now. And I have looked at it, and it does seem that this conviction does seem to impact his father more than it impacts him. So I think there is evidence astrologically, which I will soon describe, that Joe Biden is badly affected by it. As for Hunter Biden, I'm not quite so sure. I also wanted to consider Rishi Sunak. I was going to talk about him yesterday, but I'm going to talk about him again. I'm going to talk about him very briefly, and I did want to talk about his issues about D-Day. He didn't turn up to these D-Day celebrations, and it was really a big scandal in the UK that he'd somehow insulted veterans. And of course, Conservative voters tend to be older than maybe Labour voters, and so they're sort of more into the, perhaps their critics would say they're more into the past. Ceremonies like D-Day, sort of events like D-Day are more important to them, and so Sunak not turning up to these celebrations. In fact, sorry, he left early. I think I think he did turn up for a bit, then he left, and that has caused a lot of offence. So the question is why? This is kind of quite easy stuff. If you're in the middle of an election, you do what's expected of you. But he didn't get it, and so I did want to look at his horoscope. I also wanted to look at the horoscope of Samuel Alito. He is a Supreme Court judge, and he's been getting a bit of flack recently. So in his house, it was noticed, I think in May, or it hit the press that an upside-down American flag had been flown. And apparently it wasn't him that flew this flag, but maybe it was his wife. And an upside down American flag has connotations. It can be about an emergency, or it's often flown upside down in protest movements. But it has another manifestation, and that relates to the allegation that the 2020 election was stolen. And so those thinking that somehow Biden had stolen the election from Trump, they flew this upside down flag. And this suggests that maybe this is a view of him or his family or members of his family. And it's raised questions about his impartiality. And then I think a couple of days ago there was an article in the New York Times where some New York Times journalist had infiltrated some conservative meeting and got to talk to Samuel Alito, and where he gave his political views. He had very clear political views, and thought that there was some great conflict coming up in the in the US, and that people had to stand up for themselves and the importance of God. And so this raised questions about his impartiality and perhaps whether he should, recuse himself when Trump's case comes up to the Supreme Court. I can't remember which case, whether he has presidential immunity. Of course, the reality is that judges in the US are biased, and it doesn't matter whether they're left or right. I talked about the oak tree. Remember this oak tree in Tumwater, how people had been campaigning to save this tree, and there was an attempt to save the tree where someone went before a local judge to ask that, well, the city had asked, I think, had asked a local judge to remove a temporary restraining order or a temporary halt or a temporary restraint on the cutting down of this tree. And the judge pointed out beforehand, she said, well, you do know that the mayor of Tumwater has endorsed me. And so, this whole pattern of endorsement, and of course, in the end, the judge went down on the side of the city and on the side of the mayor. Now, they may have been unconnected, it doesn't matter. The point is that the judicial system in the United States is biased. It is heavily political, and I know that Americans think it's great that you can elect your judges, but if judges start standing for election, they start getting endorsed and by politicians, and that does create the possibility of bias, or at least the impression of bias. And with Supreme Court justices like Samuel Alito, they are political appointments, and again, we have the threat of bias. So I don't see how judges in the United States cannot be biased. It's part of the system. But anyway, I'll be looking at Samuel Alito and Hunter Biden and Rishi Sunak later on in this video. And I'm now going to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, which is Thursday, June the 13th, 2024. And so we have the moon in Virgo. It was in Virgo yesterday. The moon really doesn't make many aspects in Virgo, in this part of Virgo. And really the only main aspect it makes is a opposition to Saturn. Late in the day it does make a square to Mercury and the Sun, but really that's only if you're if you're only in the United States. So the main lunar aspect is that moon opposition Saturn, and there are problems with that kind of aspect. It is an opposition. The moon in Virgo is trying to sort things out. It's in Virgo. It's trying to organize things, and it's opposition Saturn. So there can be frustrations. There can be blocks. There can be hard work. I mean, moon opposition Saturn is hard work, and what one is trying to do perhaps is try to sort out some of the uncertainties and ambiguities. One's trying to break through that. Saturn represents things that aren't clear. Moon is trying to make things clear, and the moon is having a hard it's having a hard time of it. So I don't think that moon opposition Saturn is particularly fortunate. I'm not saying it's desperately unfortunate. It's just a bit of a frustrating day. I don't think we can expect it to be a particularly easy day. I'm not saying it's going to be a disastrous day. There aren't any sort of horrific aspects going on. But still, we do have to bear that in mind, and we shouldn't expect to get fast results. Also, we have Venus semi-sextile Uranus. So there is Uranus at 2452 Taurus, and Venus is at 2535 Gemini, but there is that semi-sextile, so they're one sign apart. So Venus can be about relationships, wanting to relate, and Uranus can be about things happening that might make relationships difficult. Just something out of the blue. Perhaps we were planning on talking to someone, getting on with someone, it all seems straightforward, and then just something happens. Maybe we realize something, maybe they realize something, or maybe there's just a big misunderstanding. So when dealing with other people, just be a little careful and don't assume that everything is going to be completely smooth. Venus can also be about money. And so with Venus semi-sextile Uranus, we might notice something about money which we're not entirely happy about. Might be a little bit of a shock, but not a big shock. I think with a semi-sextile, it's not like a square or an opposition. It's more about having to incorporate a new set of events or a new situation which we're not completely happy or familiar with, but we do have the capacity to bring things together. It just might be a little bit difficult. Now, there is a conjunction between Mercury and Bellatrix. Bellatrix is a fixed star. And apparently Bellatrix represents a female warrior. I don't know, it's a long time since I did Latin, but anything ending in... I wasn't very good at Latin at school, but anything ending in IX in Latin is a feminine... has a feminine gender, like matrix. And so with Bellatrix, it's feminine, female warrior. And I think bellum, isn't that bellum Latin for war? How did it go? Bellum, belly, below. Did it go something like that? I don't know. Anyway, we have the sense of a female warrior with Bellatrix. And Bellatrix is kind of fortunate. It can really stand up for itself, and it can communicate well, and it can be successful. But there is always a price with Mercury on Bellatrix. It's just a bit too much. So if you are able to express yourself, it's not going to be in a very smooth way. You are going to make enemies, at least short term, and it may be hard work. So do consider that when expressing yourself, when standing up for your opinions, because there is going to be resistance. But if there is resistance, then I think that you should be able to deal with it. As far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, let's have a look at what's going on heliocentrically. Here's a heliocentric picture. So the main aspect happening heliocentrically is a square between Venus and Mars. So here is Venus, here is Mars. And with Venus square Mars, we have a sense in which we can be charismatic. It can be about attractiveness. But it can also be about the kind of attractiveness that not everyone appreciates. So however wonderful you feel, you don't necessarily have universal appeal. You may be wonderful in some quarters, but in other quarters, no, you may not be to everyone's taste. But still, there are issues about charisma. There can be issues about sexuality with that Venus square Mars, because obviously Venus and Mars are both planets connected with sexuality, and so they are in square aspect. So it could be quite a highly charged day. And as far as charisma is concerned, the Earth, look at Earth. There's the Earth at 23 Sagittarius. And the Earth is opposition the Mercury-Venus midpoint. So with Earth on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, I think we really are able to communicate. Now, I've just mentioned that Bellatrix, geocentrically, is conjunct Mercury. And I said that Mercury conjunct Bellatrix should be quite good for communication. But with Earth on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, it emphasizes it even more. It's a time when we can be appreciated for telling the world what we can do. So if we find that there is something we can do that other people can't, now might be the time to tell everyone. Because people want to hear. They've got problems that need to be sorted out. And if we're the one that can sort out those problems, then we're going to be able to make ourselves very popular. The Earth is also quincunx Uranus. Now, we already know that Venus is geocentrically semisextile Uranus, and with Earth quincunx Uranus heliocentrically, there is a certain dis-ease here, and things might not run entirely smoothly. So we do have to be a little careful in that department. We just mustn't make the assumption that everything's going to be fine, that we don't have to have standby plans. We always have to have standby plans, and today it's particularly important that we do have plan Bs, because we just might not get what we're looking for, and people might respond in a way that we hadn't anticipated, and we have to have an alternative. And if we haven't got an alternative, then we might hit a brick wall. So that's the heliocentric picture, and it's now time to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, June the 13th, 2024. I suppose Aries, let me start with Aries. Aries, it kind of depends what you do and what you focus on. If Aries, you just focus on everything being right, you decide that there are imperfections in the world, imperfections in your own life, imperfections in how you're organizing things, and you're trying to make everything right, then things could be difficult. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on imperfections. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to get everything right, but you just have to bear in mind that such an approach is going to be tough. You're going to be annoyed and frustrated, and you just might feel that you are, like a fish out of the water, or like a ram out of its field, and you might just get annoyed. And being an Aries, you can get annoyed, and I would therefore suggest that you limit your view of what perfection actually is. Perfection is not something you're going to achieve, and really imperfection perfection is a goal that is just unrealizable, particularly for you, particularly today. And it might be better if you were to focus on other things for most of the day. Sure, if something needs to be sorted out, it needs to be sorted out, and that can't be helped. But try instead to concentrate on maybe your social life. Intrinsically, it's not a great time for your social life. Because you're not really in the mood. But nonetheless, I think, Aries, you are capable of creating effects. And this is especially the case when you're doing things that are somewhat unexpected. If you do things that no one was planning on, and if you just appear where you're not expected, then I think you're going to have a powerful impact. And it may be that you can in some way take control of your environment through a display of instability, because when people don't know what's going on, they're at a disadvantage, and that may actually allow you to sees the advantage. So that might be something constructive you can do today. But still, it won't feel entirely natural. And so what I'm kind of saying is, Aries, that it may not be an entirely great day. Though I should point out that heliocentrically, Venus is making a square to Mars. Now, that Venus square Mars, when I say Venus square Mars, I'm talking about the heliocentric system. So heliocentrically, there's Venus square Mars. Mars is your ruler. Venus is square Mars. And this square Mars, Venus square Mars, it has some good effects. For example, I think it makes you attractive, it makes you charismatic in the right quarters. But not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to appreciate you. And with the heliocentric Venus square between Venus and Mars, there could be a certain amount of friction between you and another person, because you and this other person may just be on different wavelengths. And perhaps you should just accept that rather than try to work with it. If you try to find cooperation with another person, it may just reach a stage where you're just asking yourself whether it's really worth the effort. So sorry, Aries. I'm sorry I'm not more positive. Aries is the first sign of a zodiac. It's always the first sign that I talk about. So somehow it almost seems as if I am more positive about Aries than other signs, because that's when I've just started talking. So there's sort of a bias in favour of Aries in my readings. I mean, I hope there isn't a bias, but it sometimes feels like that. But today, I don't think it's going to be great. It's very much 4 out of 10, maybe even 3 out of 10. But don't worry, tomorrow's another day. Taurus, you are quite imaginative at the moment. Your imagination is going in different directions. You can see possibilities, but you still have to ask yourself whether it really is possible. I mean, there is some possibility, Taurus, that you are deluded, that you don't see the full picture, and you might reach the wrong conclusions. But Taurus, is it actually necessary to arrive at conclusions? It probably isn't. It's just more important that you just try to understand what's going on. Not even understand what's going on, just pick up on what's going on. You don't have to reach conclusions. You just have to be aware of how complicated the world is and let your imagination run free. But don't act on your imagination. Just because you think about a possibility, don't assume that possibility can actually happen. It's just the way your mind is working. And if you can take that approach, then I think it actually can be a very fortunate day. And that is especially the case, Taurus, if you're doing anything of an artistic nature. I think your artistic skills are going to be excellent, whether it's painting or writing or sculpting, whatever you're trying to do. And at the same time, with the moon in Virgo, Taurus, I think you're going to be very creative. And also, if you are doing anything creative, I think you're going to be able to put a huge amount of effort into your creativity. And you may be helped by the moon opposition Saturn. The moon opposition Saturn can be a bit of a problem because it can make you self-conscious, and perhaps you can be overly aware of what other people are thinking and saying and how they might be judging you. So that is a negative manifestation. But moon opposition Saturn could be quite motivating. You just may feel that there's something that you absolutely have to do, and you can do it to the exclusion of all else. Though, Taurus, whatever you're doing, you've got to have some flexibility, because I can't see everything running smoothly. There just could be events happening that you just hadn't really taken into account. Now, these events may not be very big, may not be very major, but still they could throw you off balance. And as a result, you may just you just may not know what to do. So, Taurus, it's just really important to have a plan B. And at the same time, if something happens that you absolutely weren't expecting that annoys you, you should not regard it as a threat or something that is happening to undermine you. No, you should see this as an opportunity, that you hadn't fully understood the world. You hadn't fully understood what was going on. And this event is forcing you to incorporate something new into your life. You don't want to incorporate it into your life. You don't want it. You feel it's not necessary, but actually it is necessary. And so if you can take unexpected events in your stride, and if you can take a constructive attitude, then I think that you will, in the end, be able to benefit from them. Gemini, you probably feel that you don't especially want to engage. I mean, you've done a lot of engagement recently, especially with Jupiter's moving into Gemini, and we've got 4 planets in Gemini. It's all been hard work. But now you're feeling that you don't really want to be part of it. You maybe need a break. And that's nice, but it may be difficult to take a break because there are other things going on. There may be pressure for you to do things that you, quite frankly, don't want to do. So what do you do in that situation? There's a tendency, I think, for some Geminis and I'm a Gemini, remember, to be passively aggressive, and I think that's the right term. When you're faced with things you don't want to do, you don't confront the issue directly. You don't say, "Oh, I do not want to do this." You just act in a way that is just disruptive. As a Gemini, I think I can do that myself. And I had just realized that I was just looking at what passively aggressive meant, and I've just suddenly realized that I'm capable of being passively aggressive. I found that rather worrying. But so Geminis can be passively aggressive, I think, and I don't think I'm just projecting. And I think today there is scope for being passively aggressive, just doing things to make sure that you don't have to do it. And in the process, you could cause offense. So watch out for that. And maybe, Gemini, you should make a little bit of an effort to cooperate. You don't have to put much time into it, but just make the effort. Show people you care. Show people that you can be unselfish. It won't be as much effort as it sounds. So do that, and I think that you'll be making things better, both for yourself and for others. But frankly, I don't think from a social perspective it's a particularly good day. I think that there's something you're holding back, and you don't want to spend too much time with other people, especially if it's not on your terms. Though, on a positive note, and I think it's a positive note, Mercury is conjunct Bellatrix. So Bellatrix is a fixed star. I've already talked about Bellatrix. It's a female warrior. It's quite aggressive, and it is about stating your point of view. And some Geminis may pick up on this Bellatrix energy and just want to tell the world what they think. I don't know whether this particularly affects female Geminis, because Bellatrix is supposedly the female warrior, and as I've discussed, there are female connotations because of the suffix ix. It's a sort of feminine noun. Bellatrix can be regarded as a noun or feminine name, but you can really express what you want and do it in no uncertain terms. And by expressing what you want, you will get a reaction, and that reaction won't always be good. People may find it overwhelming. They might not agree with you, but Gemini, I don't think you're going to care. So if you are going to express yourself today, then yes, you can do it very effectively and you can be powerful, but you do have to understand the cost, because not everyone is going to appreciate your message. Cancer. The moon continues moving through Virgo, and with the moon in Virgo, I think that you're going to have a keen sense of detail. After all, the moon is ruler of Cancer, and so it is coloured by whatever sign it's in. And so with moon in Virgo, there are certainly things you want done in a particular way, and you're going to be quick to notice imperfections. And in a way that is good, especially as I think you're going to be able to express your views relatively well. So if something isn't right, if something isn't to your taste, then I think you'll be able to really tell the world in no uncertain terms. But with the moon opposition Saturn, there can be a bit of irritation there. You might be annoyed with other people behaving in a particular way. You might be annoyed by other people's reaction to you. And also, you're going to notice when people are doing things wrong. You know that there's a right way to do things. And if other people are doing it the wrong way, you'll notice and you'll want to tell them. But is that the right thing to do? I don't know. And we also have to remember that the moon obviously is ruler of Cancer, but Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, your opposite sign. So we do have moon opposition Saturn. And that moon opposition Saturn may indicate some kind of conflict. You and someone else having a different perspective. Perhaps you and someone else having some kind of argument. So finding agreement could be difficult, and you have to be very honest with yourself. It may be that you have a clear idea about the way things should be, and someone else has a different idea, an idea that is in some respects more advanced and inspirational from your own idea. It might not feel like that. It just might seem like someone being a pain. But if you come up with a conflict situation where someone is presenting ideas that you fundamentally disagree with, then don't rush to be condemnatory. Do consider the possibility that the person you disagree with is not wrong, and that they may have a different way of doing things, and it may actually be a superior way of doing things. So do be open-minded if you possibly can. Doesn't mean you have to be completely open-minded, but you do have to be ready to listen to what other people are saying. And in terms of close relationships, we can't avoid the fact that we've got this moon opposition Saturn. Relationships in general could be difficult. And if there are any differences between you and another person, then I think they're going to be more pronounced than usual. And that might relate to people you know very well, people you live in the same house or apartment with. You cannot get on with them entirely, and you do understand the differences between you and them, and those differences, as I said, are going to be pronounced. And I think from your perspective, it might be a good idea not to ask too many questions, because the moon is in Virgo. Now, moon in Virgo can just focus on details which in the end become pointless. So Cancer, try to focus on what matters today and don't get sidetracked by trivialities, because those trivialities could in the end cause quite a lot of damage. Leo, you are actually very talented today. There are things which you can do which really are very special. And I'm glad to be telling you this, because overall today is not easy for any of the 12 signs. And so one should take any opportunity to find something good going on. And in your case, the sun is on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. It's conjunct the Mercury-Venus midpoint. Oh, and we also see that in terms of a heliocentric system, because in the heliocentric system, the Earth is opposition the Mercury-Venus midpoint. And so Mercury-Venus as a pair, they are very talented, and the sun is your ruler. So really don't underestimate yourself, and don't allow unimportant concerns to hold you back. Now, that could happen because today the moon is in Virgo and it is opposition Saturn, and that tells us about the general pace of today. Things are slow, and moon in Virgo, people are very quick to make criticisms. And if you're trying to do something special that is a fundamental expression of your creative self, you could be upset, knocked off course by other people's criticisms. That's possible. You could be knocked off course by your own criticisms. You might be doing something and you'll be thinking, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do it. Well, you mustn't think like that, because today, Leo, you do have something very special to do, something very special to contribute. So make sure that you do it, and don't feel you have to explain or apologize. And I think that in terms of other people, yes, there are some people who could be incredibly negative, not supportive at all. If they don't understand your creativity, that's one thing. They could actually be jealous of it, so that's always possible. But with the sun, which is your ruler, being in quite a sociable part of your horoscope, I think that you can find people who really do appreciate what you're doing, and it shouldn't be too difficult. But you do have to, pick and choose. Some people just totally unconstructive. They're not going to provide you with the environment you need to be in. Other people, as I said, will think you're wonderful and will give you the praise you deserve. And I think to an extent need. I think every Leo needs a little bit of praise. They need to get some evidence from the universe that they're doing the right thing. And so it may be a question of choosing your audience. So choose an audience who appreciates your message. And then, Leo, I think things should run pretty smoothly. Though one final thing, I'd probably suggest that you don't spend too much time in the company of any one person. There is this moon opposition Saturn. Saturn rules rules Aquarius, which is your opposite sign, if you were to spend too much time with one person, then the incompatibilities might start to come out. And incompatibilities, everyone's got an incompatibility with everyone else at some level. No one is 100% compatible with anyone else. And if you spend all day with one particular person, however compatible you feel you might be with them, in the end, some incompatibilities might make themselves felt. And also, I think if you spend time with one person, a long time with one person, inevitably that relationship is going to blunt your focus and make it less easy for you to, make the most of your abilities. So if you value your creativity, then don't spend too much time with one person, because that one person could drag you down and blunt your many abilities. So that's it, Leo. A positive message, but I think you need to understand what might prevent you from achieving your full potential today. Virgo. Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is conjunct the fixed star Bellatrix. And I think that means that it is a time when you can be very honest and open about your views. Don't be shy. Also, don't try to be everyone's friend. You can't be everyone's friend. That's just not possible. So be open about your views. Do accept that not everyone is going to accept, but not everyone is going to appreciate what you say. There could be criticism, there could be resistance, but it doesn't matter, because with Mercury conjunct Bellatrix, you know what you want, and you shouldn't really be in the mood for compromise, and you shouldn't allow anyone to get you down. And that brings us on to the other main thing going on today, and that is Moon moving through Virgo, your sign, but Moon being opposition Saturn. And so with Moon opposition Saturn, there could be things holding you back. There could be people holding you back. We've had the Moon in Virgo for some time. The Moon has been applying to an opposition of Saturn for a day or two, and now it's here. And so there are a couple of people or maybe situations that could grind you to a halt. That is possible. If you allow them to grind you to a halt, they needn't grind you to a halt. But don't expect to get complete support wherever you go. There are going to be situations where you have zero support and where you're not going to be appreciated, and your personality and your contribution may be ignored. So you do have to be careful there, and you have to be aware. So every person you're dealing with today, ask yourself, is this person being helpful? Is this person being supportive? And if this person is not being helpful or supportive, then accept this and just move on to something else. Unless you feel that you're in a situation where you need to get some constructive criticism and advice. Now, if constructive criticism comes your way, you should not regard it as being the end of the world. You should take it on board. But you mustn't feel constrained by it. Fundamentally, the Moon is in Virgo, and with the Moon in Virgo, it should be a time where you're in control, where you can focus on the things that you want to focus on, the details that you want to focus on. And if you can do that, Virgo, then I think that you can really take control of the situation. And as I said, you're going to be helped by the fact that Mercury is conjunct Bellatrix. And maybe Mercury conjunct Bellatrix is actually talking about how you respond to criticism. When things aren't going your way, what do you do? Well, what you do is you could retreat, but you could stand up for yourself. And if you do stand up for yourself, the energy of this fixed star of Bellatrix is going to really pick you up, and people will notice. So maybe you shouldn't hold back, not least because Mercury is conjunct Bellatrix, but Bellatrix, because it's in Gemini, is in a really high profile part of your horoscope. So with Mercury conjunct Bellatrix in the 10th house, 10th house in astrology is the career and status house, you can really project yourself very powerfully. Again, not everyone is going to like your message. Your message might be criticized, but really you shouldn't care, because Bellatrix is a warrior, and Bellatrix doesn't care. Bellatrix, in this case, is also a bit of a verbal warrior. You say it as it is, and you get enough support, and you don't worry if some people don't like your message. That's not your problem. It's their problem. Libra. Yesterday, the moon was in Virgo. The moon is still in Virgo. And I think that from a Libran perspective, you might feel that you need time. Yeah, sure, there might be things you want to do, but do you really need to do it now? You feel that you need a break, particularly as the moon is now opposition Saturn. And with this opposition between Moon and Saturn, you may not feel in great shape. I'm not saying you feel in disastrous shape, but you might just feel that the world is complicated. There's a lot to take on board, and you might not have a great deal of energy. And so perhaps you should just bide your time. That might be the right thing to do. And an advantage of biding your time, of not getting involved with other people and their complications, is that you can start to consider what is going on, and you can also start giving free rein to your imagination. Imagination is important. You need to start thinking about what is possible in an environment where you don't have to explain yourself, where you don't have to justify your own crazy ideas. You can have a crazy idea. It's okay to have a crazy idea, because you don't have to put it into action. You can just play, and that's probably what you should be doing, just playing with different concepts. And if you can be artistic today, that would be really good. Spending time painting a picture, that would be wonderful. Just allowing your imagination free rein, and not feeling that you have to worry about what other people are saying. Yeah, sure, other people have got their opinions, and being a Libra, you're a very sociable animal. But today, I think you just need to forget that and focus maybe on your own power in your own world. And I think you may be helped by the fact that there is a biquintile between Venus and Pluto. I haven't mentioned this biquintile between Venus and Pluto to anyone else. I probably should have mentioned it to Taurus, because Taurus is also ruled by Venus. But this biquintile between Venus and Pluto is quite subtle. So with this biquintile, it means that Venus and Pluto are 144 degrees apart. And it's about what you can create, and it's a challenge to create. So with Venus biquintile Pluto, we have Venus is you, and Pluto is just being aware of this very subtle pressure to make changes. And you know you can do it. So if you have thoughts about the way the world can be and the way that you can act in the world, then you can start to find a way of being able to apply yourself. Not today, though, because this Venus-Pluto biquintile is quite subtle, it's quite personal. It's about how you are sitting in your particular part of the world. And as I said, today should be, I think, a fairly introspective day. But it's a day where you're not just allowing your imagination free rein, but you're starting to think about some of those ideas, and you're thinking, this is it. This is what I am all about. And Pluto is allowing you to take this mass of ideas and to take the ones that matter and to start to focus them. And by the end of the day, I think that this Venus quintile Pluto should allow you to have a very clear idea about what you want to achieve and what you want to be. And over the next couple of days, when the moon starts moving into Libra, I think that which is of course your sign, and when the moon moves into Libra, you're just going to feel a sense of purpose which right now you might not entirely feel, because you're wondering how you can actually make things happen, but you're working on it. And so I think that by tomorrow, things are going to be a lot easier. I should also say that Venus is semi-sextile Uranus. And given the context of what's going on, that Venus semi-sextile Uranus might be about a sudden realization. You're in a very realization state of mind at the moment, where realizations can happen. And so you might realize something that you're not entirely comfortable with. You're thinking, no, that doesn't make sense. That can't be true. But this realization is very positive. It comes from the depths. And don't neglect it. Don't say it's just something that you shouldn't bother with, you can't bother with. Accept this realization and make it a central part of who you are. I said it won't be easy, but it's worth the effort. And that's going to strengthen you even more over the next few days. Finally, Venus, which is your ruler, is making a heliocentric square to Mars. And this heliocentric square to Mars may actually make you quite attractive in certain quarters. That's the nature of Venus square Mars. Venus square Mars is a very personal, idiosyncratic form of attractiveness. It's an attractiveness that doesn't suit everyone. And so that's perhaps what's going on. And you're able to project yourself to the right people in a really very effective way. Scorpio. Scorpio, you're trying your hardest. I think you really are. And I think that you're trying particularly hard in the social arena. In some ways, Scorpios are not particularly sociable people. I know that's a bit of a generalization, but I think you are trying hard, but it is tough. I think that you're realizing the nature of your social environment. You're seeing what people are really like, even if you've known them for a long time. People, like your friends, for example. You're realizing their limitations, and perhaps there might be a certain sense of disappointment. You've done your best, but are they doing their best? And so you might be wondering what happens now. Well, Scorpio, I do think that you have the capacity to shake things up. So if you are not happy with the way things are going, in terms of your friends and your social life and other people you're in contact with, then you can certainly make changes. That might mean bringing new people into your life. That's one approach. Or I suppose it could be done in quite a confrontational sense. I suppose you could give people a piece of your mind and take a risk. If you give people a piece of your mind, I suppose there's always a possibility they're just going to run away. Or you might actually have an influence on them. That's also a possibility. And maybe if you give enough people a piece of your mind, then some of them will run away, but you'll be left with a core of people who can really support you, and they can also be trustworthy and reliable. So in that sense, Scorpio, you might take the view that you want to put everyone to the test. And that's quite extreme. You create a test and you see who's left. I mean, I'm not quite sure if that's the right approach, but you could do that. Because there is this indication that there is going to be a bit of a shake-up going on in terms of all your connections. And the reason I'm saying that is because Mars is making a conjunction to the Uranus node midpoint. So in the sort of German midpoint schools, the node is about connections. And so Uranus node as a pair is about changing connections being shaken up. And Mars is you. And so you do have the capacity to shake things up. And yeah, you might lose people, but I think in the process you could also gain people. So that is certainly something that you do need to consider. And at the same time, Venus and Mars are making a heliocentric square. So Mars is you, Venus is other people. That Venus-Mars heliocentric square is talking about the tension between you and other people. It may well be that it's you creating the tension. There's something about you perhaps that makes some people nervous. Can that be helped? If you are disconcerting, then that shouldn't worry you. Because people really do need to accept you as an individual and realize that your individuality can be disconcerting. But if you are disconcerting, it means that you're having an impact. And perhaps you're asking questions, you're forcing people to ask questions about themselves. And I think that is a good thing. Though just be aware that there could be instability here. So I'm not saying that it's going to be an entirely smooth day. In fact, I think it's going to be a complicated day. I'm not saying it's going to be a dramatic day, but your relationship with other people could be just all over the place. And I think it's just important, Scorpio, that you decide what you want. Because once you decide what you want, you'll be in a better position to take control. Sagittarius, you are feeling that it's time to make a name for yourself. You want to be noticed. That is really important to you. But can you be noticed without preparation, without warning people? I think maybe not. I think you have to understand the constraints on you. You know, one set of constraints might be your own family. Your family, I think, perhaps may be more demanding than usual. They may want you to do things. They may have expectations. And these expectations may grind you down a little. You know, you just might feel that it's annoying, and your home might be annoying. You know, it just might feel like just an extra set of obligations that you don't really want to deal with. But I think you have to get your balance right. There is this balance between you out there being noticed and, on the other hand, your fundamental security, which is in many ways related to your home and family. So you do have to get that balance right. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you have to think of it in terms of foundations. Your foundations have to be in order, because if your foundations are not in order, you're not going to be able to do all the things you want to achieve. In terms of how you actually manage the situation, I think, Sagittarius, you should try to have some distance. Don't take anything too seriously. You need to take an almost spiritual approach, saying to yourself, well, whatever it is, it's only temporary. Does it matter? Do ambitions matter? Is anything worth getting annoyed? Is there anything out there that really is worth getting annoyed about? And if you can do that, I suppose, what do they say? Think about the Zen of everything. I don't know what that means. Think about the Zen of everything. But just having some detachment is so important today. And once you're detached, and once you take every pressure as something fairly minor, so if for example your family want you to do something, you just go with the flow. If, I don't know, a domestic appliance breaks down, I'm not saying it is going to break down, but say if it were to break down, just go with the flow. Is it important? Does it matter? And not make anything significant. And by not making anything significant in terms of taking up huge amounts of your time. Because what takes up your time isn't the event yourself, it's the reaction to it. So if you overreact to an event, then it could take all day to sort out. If you just take it in your stride, then it could take you 5 minutes to sort out. So it is all about your state of mind, and accepting that, yes, what people say and do and ask for does have an impact on you, but it needn't have a big impact, just provided you are cool and relaxed about it. Now, as far as one-to-one relationships are concerned, I do think that there are some people who have very strong views and who want to stand up for something. And it's important that you respect that. And, the reason for this is that Mercury, which is a planet very much connected with relationships in a Sagittarian chart, Mercury is conjunct Bellatrix. Bellatrix is the warrior. And there is a passion to Bellatrix. And there are people well who are passionate about things, who want to stand up for things that are important to them. Now, as a Sagittarius, you're quite capable of being dismissive. Someone regards something as really important and you just dismiss it, or even laugh at it. That can happen with Sagittarians. The Sagittarians can be quite mocking. I have this theory that of all the signs that least believe in astrology are Sagittarians. I don't know whether that is true or not. I'm thinking of, there is this Doors album, or Doors, there's a recording of a Jim Morrison concert, and Jim Morrison was a Sagittarian, and he says something like, he says to the crowd, it's my birthday, I'm a Sagittarius, and you can hear all these people in the crowd saying, I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Sagittarius. All these people want to say they're Sagittarians, and then Jim Morrison says something like it's all BS or something like that. And that reminds me of what it can be like to be a Sagittarian. I mean, I suppose you're a Sagittarian, you're listening to this video, so you probably believe in astrology. And so in the same way that you value your own beliefs, I think it's very important that you value other people's beliefs. And so if someone is very serious about something and they regard it as being really important to them, you need to respect that. You need to listen to what they're saying, even if you disagree with them, even if you think they're worrying about something that's completely trivial. Just give them a bit of respect. So in terms of close relationships, I do think that respect is going to be very important. Capricorn. In one way, things are good because the moon is in Virgo. The moon in Virgo it's good from a Capricorn perspective because obviously the moon is in an earth sign. And with the moon in Virgo, this perhaps gives you a chance to realize what's important and what is just completely trivial and not worth bothering with. And you can see the details that matter, and you can also see the details that are just of no interest to anyone, or certainly not of any interest to you. But the moon is making an opposition to Saturn, and this moon opposition Saturn can be seen in two ways. It can just be seen about you in general, trying to get to higher ground, trying to see the world for what it really is, but then being caught up in trivialities, you're trying to distinguish between the facts that matter and the facts that don't matter, but still getting caught up in things that really you shouldn't be having to worry about, but just finding that you're almost ground to a halt by having to deal with stuff that is really beneath you. So that is one way of looking at it. So if you are striving for something higher, for something eternal, you don't want your own, or maybe even other people's petty reservations to get in your way. Now, there is another way of looking at this moon opposition Saturn, and we could see it as saying something about relationships, with the moon representing another person and Saturn representing you, and it is an opposition. And so this opposition between the moon and Saturn could have an impact on how you relate to other people, especially on a one-to-one level, people you care about. There could just be a difference of opinion. You perhaps have someone wanting to move in a particular direction, perhaps having ideas about it, and you have your reservations. And you're saying, no, that's not a good idea, and this leading to a big disagreement. It needn't be like this. I think you have to be ready to accept another person's analysis, even if you disagree with it. It just may be a difference of opinion, and it's a situation where one opinion is not better than another opinion. So do be able to deal with that kind of conflict, and don't make it more significant than it need be. And if you can do that, then I think that you should be fine. Now, one warning, I'd say it was a warning, is that Mars is moving towards a semi-square of Saturn. Now, this aspect between the semi-square is not exact today. I would have said it's going to be exact. Well, it's exact in it's going to be exact in, I think it's exact tomorrow, the day after. So this Mars semi-square Saturn is creeping up on you, and you're maybe starting to feel it. And Mars can be about aggravation, and it can be dangerous in certain situations. You may be creating a situation now which leads to an argument in a day or two's time. So do think about what you're doing right now and consider how it might be perceived in a day or two's time. And if you, for example, got a meeting with someone in the next couple of days, a meeting that you think might be difficult, then you'd be right in thinking it might be difficult. So perhaps you should start preparing the ground. And I think you're already going to start to see evidence of this Mars semi-square Saturn in terms of how other people are behaving. I think some of the people you know, I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about people you know well, but some people are behaving in a somewhat erratic way. And it's a bit difficult to work out what's going on, but it's almost like the herd thinks that something is wrong or that something is about to change, and you're picking up on that. You can see it. And so, Capricorn, I think it's just important to be well prepared and to just start getting ready for something quite aggravating coming up over the next couple of days. Aquarius, you are in a situation where you're doing a lot of thinking and you're probably a little bit pessimistic, simply because you can see what might go wrong. And I think that some Aquarians may be thinking quite hard about money. That is because there is an opposition between the Moon and Saturn, and this Moon-Saturn opposition is right across the finance sector, the finance axis of your chart. And you're maybe aware of the drains on your money. You know, what could prevent you from achieving your financial goals, and there's also a question of affordability and what can you afford, what can't you afford. And so it's sort of hitting you quite hard, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a financial issue, a big financial event today. It's probably more about your perceptions. And in a way, this has been brewing up for a long time, for over a year, you know, ever since Saturn went into Pisces, which was, I think, in March 2023. You know, money has been important, and today it does become clear. You can actually see the issues. So that's something you need to consider. Don't take money too seriously. Don't think that it's a be-all and end-all, because there are other things going on. And you need to consider, for example, how other people can be useful. Other people can certainly be useful. There are some very clever people around you, people who are very talented. And if you take advantage of their advice, if you listen to what they've got to say, then I'm fairly certain that you can benefit. And it may actually have a bearing on your finances. So if you are concerned about anything financially, then be ready to talk to someone about it. That might not be something you want to do in the first instance, but if you talk to someone who knows what they're doing, then I think you can actually get some very good advice today. So that is something that you should be thinking about. And also, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a time for asking questions. And it's a time for not accepting things at face value. What you see at face value is really pretty meaningless. It tells you nothing. And today is a time for lifting the lid of things. You might be afraid about what you find, and yeah, sure, you might find something. But once you see what's going on under the surface, you're going to be informing yourself about what the next move should be. And so with that knowledge, even if that knowledge is a little bit painful, you'll be able to move forward and make the changes that are needed. Pisces. There is a opposition today between the Moon and Saturn, and this Moon-Saturn opposition could be problematic, and it is likely to have an impact on relationships. So, Saturn is obviously moving through your sign. It's been moving in your sign for some time, and the Moon is now opposition Saturn. The Moon in Virgo is opposition Saturn. And so certain relationships could be under a little bit of pressure. That is possible. And it may be that you yourself are not particularly tolerant. You have your own way of doing things, and the way other people behave may not be to your liking, and you're actually going to be quite stubborn. I know that Pisces is not supposed to be a stubborn sign because it's mutable. Like the fish, they go this way and that way. But I think today you are pretty stubborn, and this stubbornness could cause problems because there's pressure on you to move, to change, to consider or reconsider. That pressure comes from the outside world. It may come from particular people, but you just don't want to move. And so you have to manage the situation, and you have to perhaps give something away. That's what people want. They want to see you giving something away. They want to see you compromising. So you have to decide what you want to compromise, what you want to give away. And, being a Pisces, you can be devious and manipulative, and you can pretend that you're giving something away, but actually you're not giving anything away at all. And perhaps maybe that's the approach. Give people something. And it needn't be very big. It might sound big, but it may not be big. Something you're prepared to lose, something that doesn't really matter. And I think that is the best way forward. So that's really the main thing going on today. Moon opposition Saturn. Also, a bit of detachment does matter. Just not taking anything too seriously. And I suppose that goes back to what I was saying with other people and giving something away. If you lose your sense of attachment, then it's easy to give something away. And if you also know that what you're giving away is not particularly important, then you can just be relaxed, and people are going to like you, and you're going to be popular. And by being detached overall, in general, and just seeing the big picture, seeing the broader perspective, not being too passionate about things, I think that's also important. I know people sometimes want to look at horoscopes they want to hear about passion and love and all of this kind of stuff. In a way, today, the more dispassionate you are, the better. I don't mean by dispassionate, I don't mean cold. I mean just not taking things too seriously, not getting emotional about anything, because really there's nothing at the moment that is worth getting emotional about. And if you just take the view that everything passes, that any argument, misunderstanding today is, by tomorrow things will change. Through a dispassionate approach, I think you'll be able to get through things very nicely. And those are my forecasts for today. And I now want to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was 59, dispersion. So here it is. And This hexagram, which I think we've had pretty recently, is about the rains, a storm. There is this storm and everything gets washed away, and it can be really quite disconcerting. Everything that has been built just gets cleared out, and our own bearings get turned upside down. It's a kind of storm where everything just gets moved around, and we might just feel that we have lost everything. That is going to be at least our first impression. We've got two moving lines here, so it's a difficult, stormy situation where where we have moments where we might feel that we're losing control, and the third line from the bottom moves. And with the third line from the bottom moving, it means that just something goes. Something that we think is really important just gets swept away, and we think that we have lost it forever. Reality is we haven't. I suppose if there's a storm and we're holding on to something, we very often let go of it, particularly if it's a really serious storm, and there's flooding and whatever. We let go of something and we think it's gone, but once the storm calms down, it's still there. And so if we do feel that we've lost touch with something today, don't panic. It's just a temporary situation, and we are going to be able to reconnect with it. And the fourth line moves as well. And with this fourth line moving, something does have to perhaps be given up. And the I Ching, at least the Wilhelm translation, gives the advice that we should be giving up on what is near in order to gain what is far. So it's like something short-term has to be given up in order for us to benefit in the longer term. And I suppose, again, that relates to the storm. I mean, if we are trying to do something in the short term, and there is a huge storm and there's loads of rain and floods, then of course we are not going to be able to continue with what we're doing. We're going to have to give it up. We're going to have to let it all be washed away. But that allows there to be a reset. And in the end, when the storm finishes, we will find that we're somewhere different. And we will find that we are a lot closer to some of our goals. The longer term goals, we're going to get closer to them. Shorter term goals, well, we may actually have to give them up. So it's a fortunate situation, I think, but it might not seem like it at the time. And this hexagram 59 does move, and it moves to hexagram 44. Now, hexagram 44 is about being very wary of other people and their influence on us. Now, going back to the previous hexagram, which was 59, that is about a storm. It's about instability. And, what do we do when we're feeling unsure of ourselves? Well, very often when we're feeling unsure of ourselves, we reach out to other people. We try to get help. But in the process of getting help, we may create ties of obligation. And so don't rush into having associations with people or putting yourself in a position where you might be reliant on someone at a later stage just because of short-term instability. And this hexagram 44 creates a real danger that we lose our independence. And I think it's because we're in a temporary situation where we feel we can't be independent, so we take on obligations, and once the situation has stabilized, once the storm has passed, those obligations remain. And so it's all a big shame. Why did we have to get obliged and obligated to someone in the first place? So the warning here is don't take on obligations, and don't allow yourself to be reliant on someone else. Don't bring someone, I mean, I suppose metaphorically, into your household. Remember, this is a Confucian oracle. Coming to meet is about maybe bringing someone into one's household because they seem harmless, and then you find that they're taking over. That's not what you want. That's not what you need to do. And so I think with this second hexagram, it's just important to be independent, and don't compromise your independence because of any short-term instability. And that's it with the I Ching. I now want to look at the astrology of what's going on at the moment, or rather a couple of individuals who seem to be important at the moment. And the first person I want to very quickly look at is Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister. And I should have covered this earlier, but I sort of didn't get round to it. So Rishi Sunak is going to lose this election, and I'm not saying that astrologically. I mean, every pollster says he's going to lose the election. There's no point in me making any predictions about the British general election. But Rishi Sunak made this serious mistake on June 6th, where there were these D-Day celebrations, 80th anniversary. So it was a very big deal. And he was a British Prime Minister, and I think it was on Omaha Beach, I think. And yet he left the celebrations early. He seemed to think it was the logical thing to do. Now that seems to be a really strange thing to do if you're if you're running an election, particularly if you're a Conservative Prime Minister, and your base is sort of older members of the electorate, people who perhaps have a greater awareness of D-Day. You know, they always say that young people in the UK, I don't know, half of them don't know what D-Day is, but those aren't the people who vote Conservative. And so this is a big mistake. So the question is, why did he make this mistake? What in his horoscope encouraged him to do something which is so insensitive? And of course, to be a politician, a successful politician, you do need a certain amount of sensitivity. You need to have a sensitivity about public opinion. And I want to just do a bit of a generalization here, but here is Rishi Sunak's chart. And there's just one thing that I just couldn't help noticing about his chart. And that is that Rishi Sunak does not have any personal or social planets in water signs. So by the way, when I say a personal planet, I'm talking Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. When I talk about social planets, I'm talking about Jupiter and Saturn. These are the discovered planets. He only has Uranus in Scorpio, which is a generational planet. It's transpersonal. It's a discovered planet. So, a whole generation of people, Uranus stays in a sign for 7 years. So Rishi Sunak doesn't have any planets in water signs unless you count Uranus. And, lots of people have no planets in water signs and they're perfectly sensitive and they understand how to behave. But in Rishi Sunak's case, clearly it was a problem. Okay, now at this stage, there is this question mark about his Venus. So Rishi Sunak at noon has his Venus at 29, I think that's 2950 Gemini. So it's true that if Rishi Sunak had have been born later in the day, he would have had his Venus in Cancer, and so that would of course been in a water sign. So maybe what I'm kind of suggesting is that this may be evidence that Rishi Sunak was born earlier in the day rather than later in the day, because how can someone make such a big mistake? I mean, it's easy stuff, and it may be that with his lack of water, he was just being a little bit too logical. Now, there's another thing about this Venus in Gemini. It's kind of interesting. The question is, which lack does he have? If he was born at the beginning of the day, he'd have Venus in Gemini, and he'd have no water signs except for Uranus in Scorpio. If he was born later in the day, he'd have Venus in Cancer, which would mean he would have no air signs except Pluto in Libra. So the question is, where is his lack? Has he got a lack of air, or has he got a lack of water? Which one is it? Now, my view is that his behaviour in terms of the D-Day landings and showing just a general insensitivity would indicate a lack of water. He just didn't have his finger on the pulse. He wasn't able to read the room, and someone who had Venus in Cancer, for example, would not have made that mistake. At least that is a possibility. Though one should say with Rishi Sunak that regardless of whether he's got Venus in Gemini or Cancer, he does have Venus on the Aries point. And regardless of any deficits, Venus on the Aries point, all things being equal, is quite fortunate because it emphasizes Venus. And if you're a politician, having Venus on the Aries point is useful. And from my knowledge of people with Venus on the Aries point, they tend to be quite sociable, quite outward going. They are able to connect with the world out there. So regardless of what a disaster the election campaign is, I suppose you could say, well, Rishi Sunak was able to climb the political pole very quickly. So he must have been able to have connections which enabled him to get to where he was, to get to where he is now. And I suppose that Venus on the Aries point, or Venus square the Aries point, must have helped him. So those are a few thoughts about Rishi Sunak. So do you think he's got a lack of air, or do you think he's got a lack of water? My feeling is he's got a lack of water, but maybe I'm wrong. Now we have the issue of Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden has just been convicted of lying on a form relating to a firearm. You know, I think he lied when he asked a question about drug use, and apparently it's a federal offence to lie on that form. So you remember, when you want to buy a gun in America, you have to fill out a form, and then I think the gun shop will check it with the FBI. I'm not an expert. I've never bought a gun, but the gun shop checks it, and that's how it works. But they take what you say on faith. If you've lied on that form, you're in trouble. And as we're finding with Hunter Biden. Now, he was convicted, his conviction, I mean, I went to the Guardian website, and the Guardian, you know, is, if you're looking for the times of recent events, I would recommend the Guardian. Whatever you think of the political views of the Guardian, their editorial line, the Guardian is very good on times. And so the Guardian was had continuous updates on what was going on with the Hunter Biden trial, and then it did give a time. I think it was 4:19 British summertime, British BST, 4:18 BST when the verdict came out, according to the Guardian. My understanding of the Guardian, which of course this was in Wilmington, Delaware, so we have to adjust that to Delaware time, which takes us to, I think, 11:18 a.m. So I think this is the time in which Hunter Biden was convicted. If I'm wrong, my apologies. But I was relying on the Guardian, and I have found in the past the Guardian is quite useful if you want to find the event We'll find the time of an event. And Uranus is on the midheaven, if that's assuming that time is correct. And Uranus is quite close to Algol. We had Algol on the midheaven. But I mean, it's not such a big deal, is it? I mean, it's not an earth-shattering event, Hunter Biden getting convicted. Okay, the moon is square Uranus. Was it a shock? I mean, I think everyone knew he was going to get convicted anyway. I was reading someone saying that the conviction rates in American courts. I was looking at a YouTube channel. I think it was Douglas Murray had a video, and he was saying that the conviction rates in American courts are something like 99%. They're at sort of totalitarian levels. So once you get to this stage, being convicted is pretty much a formality. So what did this do to Hunter Biden? You know, what was actually going on in Hunter Biden's life when this conviction came through? So here is Hunter Biden's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel is the positions of the planets when he was convicted. And, you know, there is not actually a great deal going on. You would have expected this to be a big Saturn event. But he knew it. I mean, he knew he was going to get convicted. And what we have is, there's his Saturn at 2 degrees 59 Taurus. So it's true that transiting Mars at 149 Taurus was conjunct his Saturn. That's right. But it's not even exact. So I'm just suggesting that as far as Hunter Biden was concerned, you know, we don't know what's going on through his head. I'm just not convinced that for him it was a particularly devastating event. Now, his father, by contrast, that is a different matter. So here is Joe Biden's chart. Now, Joe Biden has the moon in Taurus at, there's his chart set for November 20th, 1942, 8:30 a.m. His moon in Taurus is in the 5th house. And in astrology, of course, the 5th house represents children. And that moon was being activated by Mars. So there is Biden's moon. And so that Mars transiting his moon, less than 1 degree away. And the moon is so important for children, in terms of Joe Biden. His children matter, moon in Taurus. And Mars is conjunct that moon in Taurus. So that might reflect Biden's worry, not just at the time of the conviction, but in the run-up to Mars, in the run-up to the conviction. So the day or two before, I would guess that Biden was really quite stressed out about it, as is completely reasonable. I mean, anyone would be stressed out if their child was in court about to be convicted of a felony. Further, Biden has Saturn on his IC. So there is Biden's Saturn at 1954 Pisces. And Saturn was moving towards his IC. Remember, Saturn goes stationary direct at 19 degrees 26 at the end of a month. I think that this Saturn on his IC, remember, his Saturn is his family, and the foundations of who he is, and Saturn is really hitting it. And I think that this conviction has really hit him in two different ways, and we're going to get more of this because Mars is You see, Mars is at 1 degrees 14, was at 1 degrees 49 at the time of the conviction. Now, later on in the week, it's in a couple of days' time. So later on in the week, we have, on Friday, in fact, Friday. On Friday, we have Mars semi-square Saturn. So tomorrow, we've got Mars semi-square Saturn. So that means that we're going to not just have his Saturn on his IC, but Mars is going to be moving to the semi-square of his IC. So I think that Joe Biden is under a lot of pressure here. We may not see this pressure, and it has to do with his family. And maybe this is connected with Hunter Biden. I think it is really having an impact on him. But there is this question of why. What's it about? Why does Hunter Biden behave like he's doing? And of course, this conviction it's relatively minor. I mean, people are talking about whether or not Hunter Biden will go to prison. I know it's a gun, but it's a non-violent offence. I think he would have made it easier for himself if he'd pleaded guilty. If he'd pleaded guilty, he definitely would not be going to prison. I think that's what people are saying. But because he didn't plead guilty and he had to have a jury convict him, then that doesn't gravitate so much in his favour. And of course, I think the judge here is a Trump appointment. So who knows, that might indicate, but we know judges in the United States are biased. It doesn't matter whether on the left or the right. I think that the judge that convicted, that led the case against Trump in the hush money trial, he was clearly biased. Supreme Court, are we just about to talk Samuel Alito? A George Bush Jr. appointment bias. They're all biased, I think, or a lot of them are biased. So I think so. Objectivity in the American legal system is something we shouldn't take for granted. But anyway, we have the question: is why is Hunter Biden in such a mess? I mean, what caused it all? So one could go back to his natal chart. So here's Hunter Biden's natal chart. And as I've said, it's all to do with the accident, isn't it? He's got Mars opposition Uranus in his chart. Exact Mars and Uranus opposition. Pretty exact. And of course, the accident at the end of 1972, when his sister and his mother were killed, and him and his brother were seriously injured. That's just got to have had a devastating impact on him. And I was just wondering whether this accident is relevant to his conviction for this gun offence. And so what I did was I compared the chart of the accident. So here's the accident. Which was on December the 18th, 1972. And I compared it with his conviction to see if there's any links between the two charts. And at the time of the accident, the moon was at 4 degrees Gemini. That 4 degrees Gemini, remember, Joe Biden has his ascendant at 3-4 Sagittarius. So when the accident happened, the moon transiting moon was on Joe Biden's descendant. And so Jupiter has now just crossed Joe Biden's descendant. Now you might think, oh, that's good, it's Jupiter. But what Jupiter has perhaps done is it's brought things up from the surface. So Jupiter is hitting the moon at the time of the accident. And I think that may be one reason why it's so stressful for him. it's all bringing it up. I mean, it shouldn't. I mean, it's just. I mean, logically, it shouldn't. I mean, this is about saying the wrong thing on a form to buy a gun, but it's somehow connected. And look at Chiron. Look at Biden's. Sorry, the Chiron at the time of the accident. Chiron was at 1252 Aries at the time of the accident. So that is this terrible wound that has persisted since 1972. And the North Node was at 1257 Aries. So the transiting North Node, when Hunter Biden was convicted, was the transiting North Node is hitting the Chiron at the time of the accident. And additionally, Pluto is at 145 Aquarius. So Pluto is on, I think, the midheaven of the accident. Now, I've got for this accident, I made it around 2:30 p.m. On December the 18th, 1972, at Hockessin, Delaware. Assuming that time is correct, we've got this possibility that Pluto is bringing that accident together. So I think that for Joe Biden, somehow this conviction has brought everything up. And it's not just about him being upset about... It's not just about him being upset about his son being convicted of a felony. It leads to lots of other things. Remember, Joe Biden is a Scorpio, and so this is my reasoning for thinking that it has really hit him hard and hit him really psychologically hard. Look at the moon at the time of the conviction was at 2245 Leo, right square the ascendant for the accident. Again, assuming I've got the time right. And at the time of the conviction, we have moon square Uranus. One final point, there is this question about whether or not Hunter Biden will go to prison because of this. Hunter Biden's chart, I suppose we have to notice that he does have a lot of planets going through his 12th house. Now, you might say that the 12th house is about prison, but that Mercury, Sun, and Venus, they're going to leave Gemini quite soon. So he's going to have Jupiter in Gemini, and I suppose you could also say that Uranus is on his 12th house cusp. So you might say that would gravitate towards a custodial sentence. I don't know. I think it's more complicated than that, but I just wanted to point that out to show you, what I am looking at. Finally, there is the question of Samuel Alito, and questions are being made about how objective he is. That he's so subjective, and with this upside down American flag being flown in his garden, that he should recuse himself from the Supreme Court's deliberations and judgment regarding, I think, Donald Trump's immunity. But as I keep saying, pretty much every judge in America is biased to some extent. At least that's my view. I think there's a strong case for thinking, because they're political. If the Supreme Court's political appointments, lower judges at state level, they're often elected. That means they have to worry about endorsements. It's just a system that encourages biased judges, as far as I can see. Now, here is his chart, and Samuel Alito. That's not his chart. Those are his solar arc directions. Let me just go back to that's his chart. So he's got Capricorn rising, and one Capricorn rising. He's got a moon Saturn conjunction. I suppose you could say moon Saturn conjunction would be quite serious, judge-like. There is his 9th house cusp, So he's got his ninth house cusp at 21 degrees 40 Virgo. So why the ninth house? The ninth house is associated with the law and with higher courts in astrology. So it's kind of not surprising that he's got the moon in the ninth. You know, when you look at a chart, moon in the ninth, what is this chart about? This chart is potentially about the law. Saturn, okay, you could say that Saturn is in the eighth house, Placidus, but I think it's getting pretty close to the ninth house. I would treat that Saturn as being ninth house if I was reading this chart, even though technically it's in Placidus. And of course, if you're using whole signs, it would definitely be in the ninth house. So he's got he's got Moon, Saturn, and Mars in the ninth house. And there's his Mercury in Aries, and he's got Sun in Aries, and he's got the North Node in Aries. Aries, you could say that means he's got strong opinions, and Mercury, it's not necessarily going to be biased. This is not like Cancer. I wouldn't have said that you could say that Mercury in Aries is about bias. Mercury in Aries is about communicating. It's about how it likes to express itself. Mercury in Aries is able to express itself very strongly, which is what he did. We know the New York Times journalist talks to him at some conservative meeting and asks him his opinion. Well, of course, he's got Mercury in Aries. He just can't help himself. He just says what he thinks. And obviously he is kind of compromised by that. But every judge has opinions. As I keep that point I'm making, it's not a big deal. And those opinions are going to have an impact on their judgments. Of course, that's not a big deal. Likewise, that's the way it goes in America. And this Mercury, though, is a little bit under pressure. Firstly, it's combust. So it's conjunct the Sun. So that indicates something clouding his judgment. Further, Mercury is opposition Neptune. And again, if you've got Mercury conjunct the Sun opposition Neptune, you have got to ask questions about someone's ability to be objective, particularly if they are a Supreme Court judge, and especially if they are connected with the right, with any political, whether it's left or right. In his case, it's the right, and Saturn is causing him problems. So Saturn is currently on his moon. So as these revelations came about the upside down flag and the New York Times thing, that's when Saturn was conjunct his moon. Now, by the way, Mercury is in Aries, Mars is in Virgo, so he has Mercury and Mars in mutual reception. And I suppose that's good for being a lawyer, being able to communicate, being able to argue. Though I think that his subjectivity may actually be hidden. I mean, I don't think he even fully is aware of how much he is influenced by his own feelings. Look at his Uranus. That Uranus on the seventh house cusp. Now, that might be his wife doing stuff that he didn't know about. So if his wife has political opinions, of course, she shares the same political opinions as him, and then Uranus does something that he doesn't know about. So his wife, if it is his wife, puts up this upside down American flag, and people notice. That's a kind of shocking event. I mean, that's not very judge-like. That's not what you should be doing if you are a Supreme Court judge, regardless of your opinions. That might be the event that is causing all this shock, is Uranus in the seventh house. That's it. It's Uranus in the seventh house. That's his wife putting up the American flag. There may be other events. Uranus in the seventh. I mean, if you've got Uranus in the seventh house cusp, this is someone who does have to be watch out for their security. Uranus in the seventh can be death by the mob. Indira Gandhi had Uranus in the seventh. Who else? Louis XVI of France. I mean, I don't think he's going to be assassinated, but I think with that Uranus on the seventh, we are in crazy times, and so if you've got that and you're a public figure and you've got Uranus in the seventh, you've always got to be careful. So that's the horoscope of Samuel Alito. I don't really want to say much more about it or any more about it. I think just the key point is that with Saturn in the ninth house, it's transiting Saturn in his ninth house, and right now conjunct his moon, and it's sorry, let me get this right. Sorry, Saturn's in Pisces, of course. So Saturn is in Pisces, opposition his moon. So Saturn is going to go stationary at 19 degrees 26 Pisces. And so that Saturn has been opposition his moon, and that's been causing all the problems. And the moon is ruler of his seventh. So you could say that the moon in Virgo represents his wife. And so Saturn in Pisces opposition that moon indicates the impact of what his wife's actions, by raising the upside down American flag and calling into question his objectivity. But anyway, we know he's a judge, so you can't really expect him to be judge. If you're looking for an objectivity, you should be looking at some other profession. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did find this video interesting, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.